Singularity.
My name is Nicola, aka Socrates, and you're watching Singularity One-on-One. If you guys enjoy the show, you can help me make it better by writing a brief review on iTunes or by simply making a donation. Today, I actually have two guests on the show for the first time at the same time, and they're two fantastic young filmmakers that produced this very interesting recent movie about life extension called The Immortalists. So I'd like to welcome Jason Sussberg and David Alvarado. Hi, guys.
Hey, how you doing?
Fantastic. David, did I pronounce your names right?
Yeah, Alvarado, Sussberg.
Mm-hmm. Fantastic. So let's take it sort of one step at a time here, and let me ask you, can you guys please introduce yourself a little bit in your own words for those of our viewers and listeners who may not be familiar with your work so far?
Yeah, sure. So Jason and I both went to the same graduate school. We met in a documentary program and both have a mutual love for science, technology, and health. And so as soon as we got out of school, the very first thing we said is there's this huge community of people interested in life extension. You know, who are they? What are they doing? What drives them to do that? So we started making a film, and it accumulated into what's now The Immortalists. And, you know, we hope to keep working on films together in the future about science.
Yeah, I should also add that this is our first feature. So we made a bunch of short films in the past, and this is our very first movie.
Fantastic. And I think for a very first movie, it's absolutely amazing, and it's a great movie all in all in its own right. But let me ask you this. How did you get exposed to the idea of life extension? Because it's still kind of not in the mainstream. And why then did you decide to make a documentary about that particular topic out of all the other opportunities that you could have gone for?
Yeah, well, I ran across it because I was making a film on seasteading, and I'm sure you're familiar with that, but for your listeners who don't know, these are people who want to essentially colonize the oceans to build autonomous countries out in the middle of the water. And while I was doing that project, there was a lot of people from the libertarian community in Silicon Valley that were really excited about Singularity, really excited about AI, and the other thing they were talking about was radical life extension. And I had never heard about it. This was in 2009, and it seemed just amazing. Scientifically and from the story opportunity, it just seemed like these scientists actually believe this is possible. This could be an amazing story. So I kind of backburnered it, and then when David and we were working this job at Stanford in the basement, and we spent many, many hours just talking about science and storytelling and different films we could do. And we got on talking about this, and we couldn't stop talking about it. It just seemed to really capture our imaginations.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you start the movie very appropriately with a quote from, of course, the Epic of Gilgamesh, which is the first known reference of humanity pursuing immortality.
It's also the first recorded story that we have. So it's fitting that the first thing that we ever recorded, the whole point of Gilgamesh's journey, was to question how to live longer and what the consequences of that would be. So this is a very, very old question. And we were happy to engage with it in this documentary.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And actually, according to Cory Doctorow, it was also the first example of science fiction. So, I mean, for me, the first one was, of course, Frankenstein, but he said that, according to some people, the Epic of Gilgamesh was science fiction, or sort of maybe myths and legends were the original science fiction, kind of.
Yeah, I can kind of see that.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. So, by the way, when you speak about seasteading, was that the Patrick Friedman idea?
Yeah, it was. It was Patrick Friedman, and he's not like a day-to-day operator or executive, but he's still on the board. And yeah, that is his brainchild.
Because I remember when I was at Singularity University, that my debate with him was like one of the hottest debates there.
Oh, I didn't debated him on what on
that topic and many other topics related to it, stemming all the way from his grandfather, going through his father, and going all the way to him.
I would love to watch this.
Yeah.
I'll check it out.
I mean,
great.
it's not been recorded. It just happened at the session at Singularity University and then at the after party. So it was kind of interesting. Because, of course, his grandfather is Milton Friedman.
Right.
Very well known across the world.
Yeah,
Anyway.
your viewers might be interested in it. It's called The Sea is a Harsh Mistress, if you want to, if anybody wants to check it out.
Yeah, very cool. I would actually watch that myself out of curiosity because first I know that Jason is a great filmmaker, but secondly, it doesn't hurt to know more about that topic. I think it's an interesting topic, and you can even argue that some very well-known transhumanists such as Zoltan Istvan used the core idea for his transhumanist book, The Transhumanist Wager.
Oh, really?
Yes, absolutely. So it's a very good thing to be educated about all those, and that's where documentary filmmakers like you come into play, playing an important role, of course. So let me ask you this: what was the motivation behind making a film on life extension? What's the goal?
Mm-hmm. Go for it.
Well, it began with a personal curiosity for Jason and I. Is this, what is radical life extension? Is it for real? And are there going to be negative consequences should that come to be? And, the film, it's funny because the film doesn't really act like most documentaries where it's proposing ideas and getting different opinions and talking head interviews. It's mostly an exploration of two biologists' life and how these questions embody themselves in their life. So it's a very personal journey with those people. But we feel like those questions do kind of get answered by spending enough time with them. And so, I think the goal from the very beginning was that is learn more, spread the idea, and let the community, let the world engage with these ideas. Because I think there's a stigma about them and there's a lot of misunderstandings. And so we wanted to make a platform that people can come with entertainment value, can come to this film, have a good time, watch it, and then go home and talk about it with their grandmother, or talk about it with, their coworkers at work, and we think that we achieved that with the film.
Mm-hmm. Jason, would you like to add something to that?
Well, yeah, I guess the other motivation was that when we were in barroom conversations with our friends, or we were talking about it with other people, it just seemed to provoke so many questions. Everyone was so curious. And so we knew we were onto something just because people were jacked up about it and excited. And some of them were afraid. Some of them thought it was the worst idea. This is going to destroy the planet, destroy humanity. Other people thought it was infinite possibility. So I guess the motivation of it was just getting feedback from people that this was an interesting topic.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. It's a fascinating topic. It tends to polarize people. It's also very interesting because the majority of our public is not aware of the developments or even the main issues. There's some very hard preconceptions there that you guys sort of go into and start unbundling, if you will. So, and yes, I agree. You did a fantastic job with the film, but tell us a little bit more about your two protagonists and why these two guys. Because there's many people who are pursuing this. You chose two specific people. So who are they and why those two?
Well, Aubrey DeGray. For your listeners here, the two guys are Bill Andrews, who's a biologist in Reno, Nevada, and then Aubrey DeGray, who spends his time partially in Cambridge and in Silicon Valley. And Aubrey DeGray was an obvious person to include, for one, because he gave us the access, and then two, because he's just, world famous. Once we started filming with him and realized that he was willing to work with us and let us really embed ourselves in his life, we knew that we wanted to invest in telling his story the best that we could. And then Bill Andrews, we weren't sure about. We had other people that we were looking at first, but Bill Andrews actually called us while we were producing the film and said, "Why am I not in your movie?" And I said, I said, "Hey, look, man, we can't include everybody." But we went up to Reno just to meet him and talk to him, and he was a very, outspoken, energetic person who really embodied the passion behind the quest for the search for longer life. And so we felt like there was something in his attitude that really like embodied something special about some of the people who are dedicating themselves so much to this goal. Mm-hmm. And so we realized after we got access that we wanted to include him too. And, we feel like the two men really play off of each other well, and their differences and their similarities. So, we sort of knew that we had found the film, the idea behind the film once we talked to both of them.
And let me ask you about the title here, okay? You called it The Immortalists. Now, Aubrey de Grey, goes way out of his way to stress that his work is not immortality. His work's goal is not immortality, but it's health. And just extended lifespan is a byproduct, is not the goal. And he says, obviously, to be immortal, you have to be able to control both the internal factors, that's to say our biology and the process of aging, but the external factors too. So he says you can get perfectly healthy people run by a car every day as it happens, and there's nothing I can do about that per se. Therefore, in his opinion, the term immortality is not appropriate for the goal of his work. Why call your movie The Immortalists, and is that fair to Aubrey?
Yeah, it's a good question, and we've had discussions with him, and we feel really bad that he's unpleased with the title of the film, and we even understand his position for sure. But if longer life is the byproduct, then the Immortalists is a metaphor for the byproduct. It's not a literal claim of what he's representing, and so we were trying to capture the essence from the Gilgamesh story that we discussed earlier, the search for immortality that Gilgamesh has, that thing that is all inside of us. We wanted to capture that essence and put it into a modern context. And I think that the title, as we created it, sort of captures that initial quest. But then it's in the film, once you come to the film and watch it, you understand these are real scientists doing real science. And that's when I think people are going to have that switch come on their head. And we think that the title facilitates that.
Yeah, I should also mention that nowhere in our movie did we really take up the issue. Anytime we talk about life extension, we're talking about it in the context of curing biological aging. Everyone talks about aging as something that can be cured. No, we're not suggesting that these guys are promising immortality. The title it's a poetic liberty that we took. And like David said, we know Aubrey's position and he's not happy with the title, but he at the same time understands our position.
Yeah, I have to say I sympathize with you absolutely on the title, because it has to be short, attention-grabbing, kind of encapsulate sort of at least part of the essence, if not all of it. And yet there's that also misperception about the idea of immortality, which, by the way, you go very well into the movie explaining that that's not what Aubrey is going for. So yeah, and the poetic freedom, and I'm totally up on your side on this one.
Yeah, and we understand his concerns too, because he fights misconceptions all the time, and like he doesn't want some another thing to have to fight against. So we understand that, but hopefully the way we designed the movie and the way that the title works to get attention, and the film's gotten a lot of attention, I think partially because of how we draw people into it. Yeah. Hopefully they'll come in and they'll learn something that they wouldn't have learned otherwise. So it's difficult to know what the right call was, but we're happy with our decision, and we feel that it was the right thing to do.
Yeah, I totally agree, because people may be attracted in the beginning by their own sort of misconceptions, if you will, but once they watch the movie, then they'll see the in-depth coverage of that topic, so they would actually get the whole picture, if you will. But let me ask you this. How have your ideas and perception of both Aubrey de Grey and Bill Andrews in particular, or life extension in general, changed before and after making the movie, or have they?
Yeah, I guess we both came into it open-minded and curious, and if anything, just a little bit skeptical, just because the claims that Bill was making were really grandiose, and some of the claims of Aubrey with like a 1,000-year-old human were really grandiose. So I think intrigued and with a healthy sense of skepticism. But during the course of production, we saw that these two guys are serious scientists and their work is really multifaceted and fascinating. And Aubrey's approach is really comprehensive. He's really thought out every step of the way. And so, I mean, these are incredibly smart people who thought pretty much of everything. So I think, me personally, I've definitely come around to being believing that this is a possibility and being a supporter of, aging research in general. So that's something that changed during the course of production for me. Do you want?
Yeah, the same. I mean, for me, I had trouble, I think, at the beginning, distinguishing things like herbal supplements, like that kind of life extension, with what serious biogerontologists are talking about producing in the future. And I think there was a moment there when I sort of saw myself separating those things in my mind and realizing, oh, there's this serious effort over here that may or may not happen, but then there's this other, horse shit over here, that'll never happen. Herbs are not going to make us live forever. That's ridiculous. And so having that separation in my mind is something that I would like to share with other people, so that the conversation can be a little bit more nuanced and more fruitful.
Yeah, and I have to say, one of the reasons why I really loved your movie, guys, was because it gives this kind of uniquely frank and very open-minded, very, if I may claim, fair view into the lives of these two people. So on the one hand, it speaks volumes about the two protagonists, which allow you to have that kind of access into their own very personal lives. On the other hand, it speaks very much about you as filmmakers, which I don't think abuse that kind of privilege. And yet we're very frank and open and fair in presenting it and giving it to us. Would you mind? And so, for example, a couple of the more sort of personal issues that you show in the movie are, one, the beer drinking that Aubrey is very well known for, and two, sort of his extramarital relationships. So would you mind sharing with us a little bit about that, and how is that sort of important to be included in the film? Because somebody would say, well, look, whether Aubrey drinks beer or not doesn't matter, as far as he does a good job in life extension, and whether he has an extramarital relationship or not also is irrelevant to our topic. Why include that kind of personal stuff into the movie?
The way that Jason and I were trained to make documentaries, and the way that documentaries seem to be successful out in the world, is the time-honored method of learning about somebody's mission by looking at the peripherals of their lives. So who do they love? What do they do in their free time? These things all really, really matter to people wanting to know and figure out if they trust public individuals. And so we only filmed with Aubrey the things that he allowed us to film, and what we put on the screen was what we found by being there with him for 2 years. And so we feel like it actually does a really good job of getting people to know the human behind the public figure. And so, I guess I can't say much more than that. It's like we really enjoyed working with him, and we were so thankful that he allowed us to film.
Mm-hmm. And it doesn't necessarily have anything to do with, beer drinking and polyamory don't have anything to do with life extension per se. However, like Dave was saying, our goal was to capture who the essence of these two men were. And that just happens to be a very big part of Aubrey's life. So, we were, it was sort of a record of what we experienced during our 2-year filming period.
Plus, Aubrey, I remember him saying that polyamory is probably the relationship of the future for people who are living 300, 400 years. I mean, can you really stay married to the same person for that long? I mean, I totally agree, honestly. So I think in some ways, parts of their lives were relevant to the story in really interesting ways. So, it was fun to play around with those.
Yeah, I have to share with you, when I was at Singularity University, one of my friends there, who is a faculty Jew, very good transhumanist, Jose Cordero, he criticized me severely for being so old-fashionedly monogamous. So, yeah. But, and I agree with you on the other account too, that part of what I'm trying to accomplish with my interviews, for example, is to show the humanity. That's why I almost never edit my interviews, and I try to push the envelope in making my sort of interviewees answer questions that they don't tend to answer usually on TV, and sort of show a little bit of a different, more human, more honest, more frank side that people don't get to see in the heavily edited versions that they see on TV, right? With perfect makeup, in perfect lighting, and with like heavily edited videos. So I totally sympathize with that goal, and I want to congratulate you because I think you did accomplish it in an exemplary way, one that other documentaries actually should strive for. Because I see space for, let's say, PBS-type documentaries where they never go into that stuff, right? They just interview a scientist, usually in the lab with the lab coat, looking over a microscope or something, and that's pretty much it, right? Whereas you go with them sunbathing naked, having a picnic or something like that. That's like really a unique look into their lives, and I think that's fantastic.
Thank you.
So what's the impact of the making of that movie over your own personal lives?
That's a great question. So we both basically turned 30 during the course of production and post-production. For me, honestly, it's something I think about all the time. I do, before I started this project, I didn't see aging as, I just assumed it was something that happened quietly without suffering and then you die. But, now I now look at aging as this incredibly horrible thing where people suffer at the very end. People get Alzheimer's, all sorts of age-related diseases. So I guess the impact on me personally is it's definitely changed how much I think about it on a daily basis and the amount of compassion I have for seniors in our society who don't have access to age-related medicines to cure these diseases that are seemingly treatable.
So it seems it did change your mind on this. Like before that, you just took it as a fact that we cannot change, like aging just happens. Now you're kind of looking at it in a different way, aren't you?
Right, exactly. Beforehand, it was something that was, like time immemorial. You live, you die. And so removing that death part really, being able to cure aging obviously would remove the death part. So that definitely changed in my thinking of it. How about you?
Yeah, I mean, this whole idea about collecting data about yourself and being healthy, I wasn't a runner when I started the film, and then since then, I run all the time. Maybe that's partially Bill Andrews, who does ultra marathons.
Yes.
But, so it's just like, just like Jason, I turned 30, and I remember Dr. Grossman, one of the side characters in our film, explained, well, the aging process really begins at 30. You're fine, then 30, and there's a slow drop, and then a cliff. And so, I guess it's funny to be on that hill and start feeling myself going down. It encourages us to be healthier and better. So in a way, it's a good thing to realize.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I myself turned 38 2 weeks ago, so I know exactly what you're referring to. But let me try and wave my own flag here a little bit. Tell us how you discovered Dr. Terry Grossman.
Sure. Wait, how did we find him?
It was actually through his podcast. It was
really?
Singularity 101.
You were the one who pointed us towards him.
I saw an interview shortly after I guess the Personalized Life Extension conference, and we know David and I had been to the Personalized Life Extension conference. Saw this really charismatic doctor on the stage. He seemed really interesting. Had great things to talk about. Was unabashed about his proclamations about living forever. His book title is called Live Long Enough to Live Forever. So he hit all the marks, and he was really compelling. And so, it was through your podcast that we were able to reach out to him and do preliminary research, because you, in your questions, asked a lot of the questions that we do on our pre-interviews. It was really great having that resource as a research.
And why didn't you make him one of the protagonists of your film?
That's a really good question. Actually, we tried.
Because I would have imagined him to be also another one of the sort of perfect candidates.
Yeah, absolutely. And absolutely. So at the beginning, we filmed a lot with him, actually. For those who haven't seen the film yet, he really has only one scene. You know, after you meet Bill, you meet Aubrey, you spend some time with them. They come together at a health clinic in Denver, Colorado, the Dr. Terry Grossman Wellness Center, and the two men are there getting their health metrics measured. And it's a fun scene where they're kind of being a little competitive about who's healthier for their age. And, you know, it's just a cute scene. But in that scene, we also meet Dr. Grossman, who kind of explains the concept of how somebody alive today could take advantage of increasingly powerful technologies that would develop over time. And so that's his only scene. But we filmed with him actually for a good long time. We could have actually made a whole film with the material that we had of him and put that in there, but it just didn't work. You know, we have this concept that films kind of be what they want to be. They shape themselves, so we sort of just guide that. And for whatever reason, having three main protagonists didn't really flow right, and we kept trying to make it work, and it just wouldn't come out of the edit. But we do have the material, and actually we think somebody should totally make a film about him. He's a very interesting guy, some interesting points, and he's also a really good dude.
I remember in the original trailers during the production of your film, he was heavily featured, and one of the most interesting things about Dr. Terry Grossman is the fact that he co-wrote this book with Ray Kurzweil called Transcend, Live Long Enough to Live Forever. And he has this clinic for life extension. Yet, at the same time, he himself has chosen kind of not to go that route.
I know.
Which is a very fascinating, interesting sort of personal dilemma. And I think this is where the opportunities lie. When people have that kind of divergence. That's why I think it's so very important to live the message. And usually if you're not, then you want to really explore what's at the core of that dichotomy or that divergence, that paradox.
Yeah, absolutely. That was actually one of the seeds that was planted early on, that we were like, oh, we have a really complex movie here, because here is a guy who's a quite literal living paradox. And he said this to us off camera, that he didn't want to, live forever himself. And that just kind of planted in our brains, and it was something that we really wanted to tease out, because obviously Bill and Aubrey are the exact opposite. Part of their goal is to do the research so they can take advantage of the research. Terry's totally the opposite. So what is his motivations? Is it humanitarian, or does he see something that we don't see? So I don't know. It really just opens up a really big slew of questions that are worth exploring.
Let me just correct you here a little bit, if I may, though, and see if you agree with me. I think Bill totally wants to take advantage of these technologies, but I think during the movie, Aubrey actually says, during your own movie, Aubrey says that it never occurred to him to think about it in personal sense, but it's more about the humanitarian end of things. So it never occurred to him to do it for his own wife or for his mom or for his own sake. Rather, it's more of the global impact.
And what do you think? Do you agree with him?
I do. Well, to the extent that I know him, and of course Aubrey is a friend of mine, but I don't know him nearly as close as you guys. But I think I believe him. I think his motivation is more of a sort of humanitarian or social rather than personal.
Yeah, no, I think we don't want to say that. We don't want to say that the wrong way.
Yeah.
But I think if the technology existed, Aubrey would use it, and he would then live longer. And So I guess that's the difference. Like we weren't saying that he's only doing it for himself. Yeah. That's different. But because the question is, would Terry Grossman, if the technology was here, take it? His answer is no. Yeah. Bill's answer would be yes.
Yes. I totally agree with that. I just think that Bill is a little bit more focused on his own immortality too. Yeah. Terry Grossman is very much against, and Aubrey's kind of in the middle between the two of them. Right. So that's my sort of ranking in a weird way. Yeah. So I know that, being a content producer myself, I know that creating a movie for 2 years is a very big, very hard thing to accomplish. So what was the hardest thing that you had to overcome? The biggest obstacle that you have to jump over during the shooting of the movie? Or did that come afterwards? Like, what's the toughest thing you had to deal with?
I would say money. I mean, you know how this goes. It's so expensive, so expensive. Money just leaking out of our ears, and I was like living with a girlfriend at one point, eating ramen noodle, even though we had a huge budget film, like we just couldn't raise enough money for it. And we did everything so cheaply too. So it was a real big lesson in, the cost of these type of productions. And, sort of, we're working on another project now, and we're hoping to, we're trying to figure out how to do it right financially. Instead of just it coming out of us, we wanted to find the right partnerships to do the film with.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. Also, just to add to that, the entire process has been a slog. But surprisingly, one of the hardest things was after we were finished and after it got into festivals, just learning the distribution ropes was a kind of a nightmare, honestly. It's really competitive getting things into festivals. It's expensive to travel. It's expensive to go places. It's every step of the way has been a slog, but worth it. And, I don't think we would take it back, but nothing has been easy about this film.
No.
Yeah, and one of my first interviews that I ever did was with Barry Ptolemy about his film Transcendent Men. And I remember it took probably more than 2 years before he even was able to get it into distribution. So, yeah, this is... And also, as a content producer, podcaster myself, I know how and who is actually starting to produce more and more in-person interviews. I know myself firsthand how expensive those can be. And actually, by the way, as a curious side note, I was supposed to do this interview in person, visiting David in Brooklyn. But unfortunately, last week when I was in New York, my plane got twice delayed, then canceled. Then I got rebooked, and that plane got twice delayed and canceled. And so I ended up arriving 10 or 12 hours later than I was originally supposed to, and hence we're doing the interview on Skype. And that, I just watched sort of the panel discussion with the producers of Cosmos. And it's kind of an interesting parallel because let me ask you this, guys. How many days of shooting did you have, and how many people were involved in the production of your film?
I don't know how many shooting days there are. We basically shot for 2 years, but sparsely. So that's actually a hard question to answer. But, and then as far as the production goes, Jason and I'm the cinematographer. Jason records the audio, and we're both the directors. And so the actual production team is pretty small. But then the team around that, the editor, the colorist, the sound mixer, there's a whole team of post-production behind that. And so it's a fairly large team.
Fairly large meaning a dozen, 2 dozen?
Let's say slightly less than 10 main players, and all over the world too. Jason lives in San Francisco. I live in New York City. Our executive producer, Chuck Braverman, lives in Los Angeles. Our sound mixer was in Denmark. So, for those who watch the film, the audio is a really visceral part of the production, and that was all done in Denmark.
Yeah, the music's fantastic.
Thank you.
Very appropriate, very perfect.
Oh, good. I'm glad you like it. And so, it's like it's a very worldwide team. The editor was Finnish, so, we were really spread out. It was an international project, even though it's a very small one. Yeah,
the reason why I'm going in depth of those details is because I don't think that most people actually realize how tough and how expensive it is to produce. Just one example, I just did one interview with Dr. Michio Kaku about a few weeks ago, and I drove from Toronto to New York to save money. And it still cost me $2,600 for that just one single interview, which we shot on a single day for about a couple of hours, right? That cost me $2,600. So it's very expensive. And as a sign of comparison, Cosmos, I was watching the panel discussion yesterday. They said they had 750 people directly involved in the production of Cosmos, plus 250 who were afterwards on the special effects side of things with contractors. So we're talking about 1,000 people being involved in the production of Cosmos. And they had over 1,500 special effects and CGI effects and all, and let's not mention a budget of tens of millions of dollars.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So it was the biggest documentary rollout in the history of documentaries ever.
That's crazy.
I didn't know that, actually.
Right,
We're
so-
really excited about that series. Jason and I are obviously huge Carl Sagan fans.
Mm-hmm.
And so, when we heard about that, we were really excited.
Yeah, I just finished watching the series yesterday, and I watched the panel discussion afterwards, and it was like fantastic. And they had 70 days of straight shooting with lots of blue screening and lots of locations and so on. But anyway, let's go back to Earth to sort of the indie productions that we are. And let me ask you this. What's the benchmark of success that you have for yourself, that this movie was worth making, this movie was not, our time was not wasted, our struggle to give birth to this child was worth it? Is there such a thing? How would you know that you've accomplished the impact you're going for?
Yeah, it's a great question. We are negotiating right now for international sales. So right now we're trying to. There's several different kinds of markets that indie films can get into, and we're basically getting offers for all of them, which is a great opportunity for life extension as a topic. So there's educational sales, for example. We're going to be able to sell this to universities all over the world, so students can have access to it. Broadcast sales, we're trying to get a major U.S. broadcaster, and in Europe especially, we think they'll be very interested in this topic. And then obviously VOD is going to be a big, huge resource for people to come find the topic and learn.
Netflix?
Yes. So we're making a deal with a company who, once they buy it from us, they take it on, they sell it to Netflix, iTunes. So it's going to be available online for anybody to purchase for $4 or whatever their fee is, sometime hopefully in the fall. And that's also going to coincide with a theatrical release. We're going to be releasing the film in 10 different U.S. cities sometime around late fall.
Yeah, that kind of preempted my question, where can people watch your movie? Because right now it's very limited kind of. I was very privileged to be able to meet you guys and watch it at the Hot Docs premiere in Toronto. So thank you for that. Really appreciate it. But we want more people to see it. So how and where? Yeah.
So we start with the film festivals. There's their priority is to have premieres. So we had our world premiere at South by Southwest, and then our international premiere in Toronto, and then we're going to London International next for the European premiere.
When is that going to be?
That's in October. I think the second week of October.
Yeah, because UK is second or third on my audience list, so you might want to give us more details for that.
Sure. Maybe we can post it. They actually haven't announced when. Exactly. So we don't have any information.
Okay, cool. So just send me the link and I will add it to the interview if the information is known by the time we publish this. And then you said in the fall, hopefully we'll get it on iTunes or Netflix.
Yeah, exactly. Sometime like November, there's going to be a 1 week run in New York and Los Angeles, and then it's going to be released on iTunes and other VOD platforms.
Fantastic. Yeah, I hope more people get to see it. Let me ask you this, guys. You already shared, especially Jason shared about how his view on life extension changed. But what was, after making the movie, what was the most surprising thing that you discovered for yourself during the shooting of that film that you totally didn't expect?
That's a good question. I guess I'm surprised that we could pull it off. That we could, it's no small feat to put together 80 minutes of entertaining material, getting access to people. We took the project to India, to an ill-fated trip to Africa. We went to the UK twice. So I guess I'm just surprised that we're talking to you now. It was a slog.
I could have easily seen the project falling apart at different points.
Yeah.
Especially around funding. I mean, there was a point when we already spent about $200,000 and we still hadn't even edited. There's another $50,000 of editing to do. I mean, it's just incredible. Totally.
Would you mind sharing with us what your final production budget was, if possible?
Yeah, it's more than 200, which is still low for serious documentary films. You know, people usually work with $500,000 budgets, and so this means that Jason and I are just working for free the whole time. It's totally a passion project, and then the hard costs around that, just you can't not pay for plane tickets and things like this.
Yeah, tell me about it. It always amazes me that I'm still doing this pretty much for free, but I love doing it so much that it's I can't help it not doing it, so I just have to do it. And I think documentaries, artists, musicians, they kind of suffer from the same affliction.
Mm-hmm. It's true. You get to do what you love, but it's hard. And but you know, I mean, as far as like life extension and the singularity, and I mean, I think hopefully there's going to be synergy from like artists doing projects about it that'll bring more people into the interest, and maybe more people will watch your show, and then, you know, vice versa. So it's good that we're all working towards talking about these things, because they're just so interesting, you know, and I think they're so interesting to most people. Just most people don't already know about it. So, you know, I think we'll all move forward together.
Mm-hmm. So let me ask you this: for you, if you have to capture them, and that's kind of a trick question, but if you have to capture them in one or two words, I'm referring to your protagonists, Aubrey de Grey and Bill Andrews. Take Aubrey, for example. Is he a genius, a charlatan, a prophet, a visionary, a drunkard, a nutcase?
What do you think?
Well, I mean, he's a genius, no doubt about it. He's incredibly intelligent. His system that he came up with. I know you're looking for one or two words here, but I think genius is fair. I think he's a guy who likes to have a good time. He likes to have a good time drinking, and he loves women. He indulges. Yeah, so he's a good time person. Aubrey's definitely like the center of attention. As soon as he walks into a party, everyone wants to talk to him. He's magnetic. Bill also, he's a genius as well. Driven, crazy passionate, extreme. Bill's extreme. Like the man runs 130-mile marathons at 18,000 feet and doesn't bat an eye. And then he goes on a warm-up race the next day. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, that's it, and that's exactly why we were drawn to them as characters. Like, they're just amazing people that I think it's easy to watch them for 80 minutes and want to know more.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I have to agree with you, especially about Aubrey. I mean, I'm not familiar, and I haven't met Bill Andrews before the premiere of your film, but as far as Aubrey is concerned, I have to say that I've interviewed 150 people by now, some of the smartest people in the world, and Aubrey is definitely in the genius group. He is easily one of the most eloquent ones that I've interviewed, easily one of the people with the broadest knowledge that can draw upon all kinds of different resources. And he is definitely incredibly charismatic. So, I mean, the beard, the whole, like, he has presence. When he walks in the room, he has presence. People notice instantly. Yeah. So I agree. And they're perfect subjects, therefore, for a documentary like that. So what do you think? Are they going to be successful at this quest to defeat aging? Two charismatic people, brilliant, genius, etc.
It's so hard to know. I mean, I don't know. I mean, it could be them. It could be somebody else, or, you know, maybe we as a society reject it so much that the quest goes away. You know, I mean, it's hard. I can't predict, and I'm not even good at predicting. So it's just so hard to say. I think the question is for us is, do we as a society want it? Is this something we want to invest in? And if so, like, how do we move forward? And hopefully that'll be the focus that people talk about.
That was my follow-up question, which you preempted. Do you, too, want them to succeed? Why or why not?
Well, I mean, I think if there was, I always say this at the screenings, you know, we always like have a hands up, you know, who would want to live forever? And it's always different based on geographical locations. I think, in Toronto, a lot of people did want to live forever. But then we did a show in Wisconsin, and there's very few. So I'd like to see those numbers go up. And I think for me personally, if you had a blue pill and a red pill, and one was like, I'm going to die of old age, and the other one was like, I'll stay young until I get hit by a bus. I mean, I feel like it's a no-brainer now for me personally.
I think the question also could be asked, do you want to slowly suffer from age-related ill health? to borrow a line from Aubrey. And I think that not a lot of people say, oh, I look forward to suffering from age-related ill health. So,
it's kind of like I'm young enough to remember when cell phones were becoming very popular, where everybody started to have them. And there was a moment in time when there's still a discussion like, oh, you're one of those people who have those cell phones. You can't wait until you get home to get a call from me. You can't just hang on and like stay unplugged from the world for a second. And now everybody who I remember saying that has a cell phone and shut up about it. And now they're happy with it. And they found a new way to connect with people. And they realize, I guess they realize that they have to participate in the world with this technology. And I just feel like if it does ever happen, it's going to be exactly like that. People are going to remember the time when we didn't think it would be good to be young indefinitely.
Let me share something on that point too, because and it's something that I haven't shared publicly before. I had a very serious period of that myself, and it was maybe from about 97 to about 2003 or 4. So for a good 6 or 7 years, where I was pretty much shunning most computers, and for the longest time I refused to have a cell phone. I was like, is that some kind of a philosophical emergency or something? Like, people who want to find me, they'll leave a voicemail, right? They'll find me. I'll get back to them eventually.
We all knew people who said that, and isn't it funny looking back? And I just feel like this our times could kind of be like that with life extension and aging, and so we're united with Aubrey and Bill in helping people think about it in those terms. Not to say that people who are elderly don't have value. I mean, if anything else, it's the opposite. They have value, and we should help them be healthier. And so, I just think that people have the sea change hasn't happened yet in the general public. Yeah,
I agree. And that's why it's so interesting to watch it from the personal perspective, how we've changed. And here I am, having one of the sort of the foremost transhumanist / singularitarian podcasts there on the future of technology after I kind of shunned it for about 6 years out of my life. So it's totally ironic and super interesting to see how it changes people over time. And even Facebook, I fought Facebook for maybe 2.5, 3 years after it came out. I refused to join Facebook. And now I'm there like every day.
Yeah.
So guys, we've had a fascinating conversation with you, and we learned that you're still in the sort of the distribution, figuring out the distribution of the film. So let me ask you, what's the best place for people to sort of follow up on your work and get updates on potential screening dates and places for the movie, or eventually when it becomes available to stream on Netflix or iTunes or somewhere else?
You can always look at the website, which is theimmortalists.com. Or you can go to the production company website, structurefilms.com, and find more information there.
Also, we're on Twitter and Facebook. So Facebook, The Immortalists, and then Twitter, it's our handle is The Immortalists. So we're pretty easy to find, and we keep a pretty active social profile. Mm-hmm. So we make all sorts of news announcements, and also we curating a discussion about living forever.
Fantastic. I have to say, I wish you good luck with your movie. I personally enjoyed it very much. I watched it twice and enjoyed it the second time even more than the first time. Let me ask you this, though. We've had a 45-minute conversation today. And what is the most important message? What's the most important single thing that you would like our viewers to take away from this with you today?
I think it touches on that last thing we talked about. It's how do we value our health, and in that context, what do we do in a world where we might be able to change these options? I mean, what does that world look like, and how should we have a conversation about it?
Jason?
Yeah, I agree that we're going to be making some really interesting discussions as a civil society, and science is going to be progressing with or without the public, so we should be involved in the discussion.
Well, Jason and David, the guys who produced the Immortalists, thank you very much for being with us today. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you. It was a great discussion. We had a great time.
Oh, yeah.